My son said I was too old, too slow, and too confused. So he made me sign papers that gave him my furniture business because he said I didn't need it anymore. But I wasn't old. I wasn't done. While he thought I'd just give up and go away, I was planning something that would make him sorry for every word he wrote on those papers. I built Mayfield's custom furniture from nothing. When my husband died, I had 3-year-old Marcus and big doctor bills to pay. I didn't have time to cry. I had to learn how to use power tools that were bigger than me. I worked 18 hours every day in my garage. I taught myself how to build furniture and keep track of money after Marcus went to bed. Every chair I made, every table I built was like putting money in the bank for our future. I missed Marcus's first steps because I was delivering a dining set to pay for daycare. I didn't eat so I could buy his school stuff. When he wanted to play baseball, I sold my grandmother's pearl necklace to pay for his uniform. When he needed braces, I borrowed money and worked weekends for 2 years to pay it back. By the time Marcus finished high school, everyone knew Mayfield's custom furniture made the best stuff around. People waited 6 months to buy from me. Customers came from 4 different states. I paid for his college with cash. I bought him his first car. When he married Sarah, I paid for half their wedding. Every hard day was worth it because I was building something that would last forever. Marcus never cared much about the business when he was growing up. He liked computers better than wood. He said making furniture was old stuff. That was okay with me. I wanted him to have choices I never had. But deep down, I always hoped he would see how beautiful it was to make things with your hands. I dreamed about teaching his kids how to build furniture too. Things started going bad when I turned 70. Marcus kept saying I was slowing down, even though I had more work than ever. He would visit my shop and point out tools I had lost. But I hadn't lost them. I had let Jake borrow them. Jake was my helper. Marcus would look at my bills and say I made math mistakes when I didn't make any mistakes at all. When customers said nice things about my work, he would smile tight and say, "Mom's still okay most days." Then he started leaving me out of family stuff. Sarah would plan holiday dinners without asking when I could come. She just figured I would be too tired. Marcus stopped telling me about Emma and Tyler's school problems. He said they didn't want to worry me. When Emma had to have surgery, they did everything without telling me. I only found out 3 weeks later when Emma said something about her scar. Marcus started taking things from my shop. He said he was organizing my tools for me. He made copies of all my keys. He told Jake it was for safety. When my old customers called my house instead of the shop, Marcus would answer and talk to them himself. Then he would tell me he was helping me by taking care of it. The worst part was how he talked about my work. At my 72nd birthday dinner, Marcus stood up to make a speech. He spent 5 minutes talking about my little hobby business. He said it was time for me to enjoy retirement, like other old ladies. 49 years of hard work. He called it a hobby. Sarah nodded and smiled like he had said something sweet. Marcus started dropping hints about money. He would say how much money I could make if I sold the business. He said I could finally relax and not worry about paying bills. He brought me books about retirement homes. He showed me all the fun things I could do if I wasn't tied down to work. When I said no, he got more pushy about it. Through all of this, I kept my mouth shut and watched. I had learned over the years that sometimes you fight and sometimes you just listen and learn. Being quiet wasn't being weak. It was getting ready. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning. I got to my shop and found Marcus already there. He was sitting at my desk with a bunch of papers. There was a man in a fancy suit I didn't know. Sarah was there too, sitting in the corner. She wouldn't look at me. "Mom," Marcus said. He didn't stand up. "This is Mr. Henderson. He's a lawyer. We need to talk about what happens next for you." I put down my coffee and crossed my arms. My shop felt wrong with strangers in it. What kind of talk? The lawyer fixed his glasses and cleared his throat. "Mrs. Mayfield," Your son is worried about your ability to run a business this big. We have papers here that would let Marcus take over. You would get money every month but wouldn't have to work anymore." My blood went cold. Each word hit me like a punch. Liability? Marcus leaned forward. His voice got that tone I hated. Like he was talking to a little kid. "Mom, you've been making mistakes. Jake told me you forgot to order wood for the Morrison job last week. Yesterday you couldn't find the Johnson bill. Sarah and I have been talking about this for months. It's time." Every word was a lie. We all knew it. I never forgot a wood order in my life. The Johnson bill was right where it should be, in my files where I put it 2 days ago. But they had their story all figured out. If I said no, it would just prove they were right about my mind going bad. Mr. Henderson pushed the papers toward me. "These papers will make sure you have money and take away all the stress of running a business. Your son told me this is what's best for you." I looked down at the papers. Business papers. Power papers. Money papers. 49 years of my life turned into legal words. Marcus watched me like he had already won. Like he had spent weeks planning this exact moment. The room got quiet. I could feel them waiting for me to get mad or cry or prove their point about my mind. Instead, I picked up the pen Mr. Henderson had put next to the papers. "Where do I sign?" I asked. That night, I sat in my kitchen with those signed papers spread out on the table. They looked like proof that I was dead. Marcus had left them with me to keep. He told me he was proud that I made the smart choice. Smart. Like giving away my life's work was smart instead of giving up. He even hugged me at the door. He held me tight and said he would take good care of everything I built. But I hadn't given up. Not really. They didn't know I had been getting ready for this day longer than they had been planning it. You don't make it 50 years in business without learning how to read people. I had been reading Marcus for months. Every comment about my age, every idea about retirement, every question about my work had been building up to this moment. The papers he made me sign were real, but they weren't everything. Marcus didn't understand that Mayfield's custom furniture was like a tree. The shop and the tools were just what you could see above ground. The real roots were hidden. The special ways I had learned to build furniture. The people who sold me wood cheap because they trusted me. The big contracts that made most of my money. I went to my own filing box, the one Marcus never looked at because he thought everything important was at the shop. Inside were the real treasures. Special contracts with 3 big hotel companies. Legal papers that said I owned the ways I built furniture. And most important, contracts that said Marcus couldn't compete with me for 3 years. My phone rang at 11:30. It was Jake. He had worked with me for 8 years. He was like the son I should have had when it came to loving the work. His voice was angry. "Mrs. Mayfield, Marcus came by tonight after you left. He told me you signed the business over to him. He said he didn't need me anymore. He said I could work until Friday and then I was done." I closed my eyes. I was mad at Marcus for being so mean. Jake had learned everything from me. He was a great furniture maker now. Marcus was throwing him away like old wood. "Jake, how would you feel about starting your own business?" "What do you mean?" "What if I told you I have enough work to keep you busy for 2 years? And the legal right to stop Marcus from taking any of it?" Jake was quiet. Then he laughed. It sounded like sunshine. "Mrs. Mayfield, I think Marcus doesn't know who he's messing with." "No," I said, looking at those papers on my table. I felt 49 years of planning falling into place. "He really doesn't." The next morning, I called my real lawyer, Elena Rodriguez. She had been taking care of my business legal stuff for 15 years. She knew everything about how I had built my business. She knew about every patent I owned and every contract I had signed. She knew about all the ways I had protected my work over the years. "Dolores," she said after I told her what happened. She sounded happy, like she had been waiting for this call. They think they got the cow, but you still own the milk. In 2 days, Elena had filed papers to start Mayfield Legacy Woodworking LLC. I was the owner and Jake was my partner. We moved all my patents and contracts to the new company. The no-compete deals I had put in every big contract over the last 10 years meant Marcus couldn't do any of that work for 3 years without getting in big trouble. Marcus found out about the first problem when he tried to finish the Morrison dining room set. It was worth $12,000. But it needed my special way of joining thickwood pieces. That way was protected by patent #7/394/128. Only Mayfield Legacy Woodworking owned it. When he tried to use it, our lawyer sent him a letter. It said he had to pay $12,000 to use my method. That was exactly what the job was worth. This is crazy, Marcus yelled when he called me that night. His voice was cracking. You can't own basic woodwork. It's not basic woodwork, I said calmly. I looked at my nails while he got upset. It's a special way I spent 6 years figuring out. The patent office agreed it was new enough to protect. If you want to use it, Elena can send you the price list. The Grandview Hotel contract was the second shock. Marcus called them to say he was the new owner. But they told him their deal was with me personally, not with the shop. The contract said Dolores Mayfield would personally watch over all the work. When he asked about changing the contract, they said they would have to start over with new bids. And their contract said no other furniture company could use Mayfield methods without my written okay. The Hilton contract was even worse for Marcus. They ordered 200 custom headboards every year. Each one used my patented floating panel design that stopped squeaking and lasted longer. The contract was worth $80,000 every year. It renewed automatically as long as I kept working. Marcus couldn't fill the order without paying me to use my method. He couldn't compete for similar work because of the no-compete rules. He couldn't even bid on new contracts because Hilton now required Mayfield quality standards as the minimum. By the end of the first week, Marcus had lost 40% of his expected money. He faced legal problems on 60% of his active jobs. Jake and I had set up shop in a warehouse space 20 minutes across town. It had better lights, better workflow, and cost less than the old shop. On our first day, 3 hotel chains called to make sure their contracts would keep going. The beautiful thing was that it was all legal. Every patent, every contract rule, every licensing deal had been filed the right way years before Marcus ever thought about taking over. He didn't steal a business. He got a beautiful empty shell with no way to make money from it. All those years when he said my work was just simple crafts, I had been building legal walls around every method, every relationship, every source of money that mattered. But the real masterpiece was still coming. Marcus didn't know about the supplier deals yet. The real learning started 2 weeks later when Marcus got his first bills as the new business owner. The shop rent had been low because I had a good relationship with the landlord. I had paid on time for 20 years. When Marcus took over, the rent went to current market price. What cost me $1,800 a month now cost Marcus $3,200. The landlord wanted 6 months rent up front because Marcus had no business credit. The insurance was the second money shock. My coverage had been cheap because I had never had an accident in 49 years. I had safety certificates too. Marcus's insurance jumped to standard rates for a new business owner with no experience. The yearly cost went from $4,800 to $14,000. He had to pay every 3 months. When Marcus called to negotiate, the agent explained that woodworking was dangerous. My old rates were earned through decades of being safe and smart. The equipment money was where reality hit home. I owned all my big tools. I had bought them over decades as the business grew and I had cash. Marcus found out that replacing or upgrading tools would need business loans. The interest rates were high because he had no collateral and no business credit. The table saw that had worked perfectly for 15 years would cost him $28,000 to replace. He would have to pay 12% interest because he couldn't get better terms. But the supplier relationships were the real killer. Marcus found out that my lumber costs were 30% below market rate. I had been buying from the same suppliers for decades. I often paid bills early for extra discounts. Samuel's hardwood lumber had been giving me net 10 pricing since 1987. That meant I could get delivery right away and pay within 10 days for another 2% off. Marcus, as a new customer with no payment history, was quoted net 30 terms with payment due when delivered. The prices were sometimes 40% higher than what I had been paying. When Marcus called Samuel directly to argue about the prices, the talk didn't go well. "Son," Samuel told him, "your mother earned those prices by never missing a payment in 37 years. She sent us business when she had too much work for herself. You want those prices, you earn them the same way she did." The special hardware was even worse. My drawer slides, hinges, and finishing hardware came from a supplier in North Carolina. They had been giving me craftsman pricing since the early 90s. They sold to me at 30% above wholesale. Retail pricing was often 3 times wholesale cost. Marcus's first order for replacement hardware came to $6,000. The same materials would have cost me $2,200. When he called to fight the pricing, they told him that craftsman discounts were for proven professionals with good expertise and payment history. He could try again after 2 years of perfect ordering and payment. Meanwhile, Jake and I were doing great in ways that went beyond just making money. The warehouse space I rented came with loading dock access, climate control, and twice the space of the old shop for only a little more monthly cost. Without the emotional baggage of the old place, we could redesign our workflow from scratch. We put in efficiency improvements I had been thinking about for years but never got around to while dealing with Marcus's constant interruptions and criticism. The Grandview Hotel contract alone kept us booked solid for 8 months. When other hotels heard about our special techniques and patent-protected designs, they started asking for quotes on their own projects. The Marriott chain offered us a consulting contract to develop signature furniture designs for their luxury properties. The Weston Group wanted to license our headboard patent for their new construction projects. We weren't just keeping our old income. We were expanding into markets that had been close to us when we were just a small local shop. More importantly, Jake was flourishing as a true partner rather than just a helper. His natural talent for finish work had been underused in the old shop structure. Now it became a major selling point for our higher-end pieces. Hotels specifically asked for his hand-rubbed finishes. We could charge premium rates for work that showed off his skills alongside my structural innovations. For the first time in decades, I had someone who could match my passion for the craft itself, not just the business success it created. The breaking point for Marcus came when Mrs. Chun called to cancel a $15,000 bedroom set order. She had been buying furniture from me for 23 years, ever since I made her daughter's first toddler bed. "I'm sorry, Marcus," she said, "but when I heard Dolores wasn't making the furniture herself, I lost confidence in the quality. Her hands were the guarantee. I'm having her new company do the work instead." Marcus tried to argue that he could deliver the same quality, using the same techniques and materials. Mrs. Chen's response was polite but devastating. "Dear, I've been watching your mother work for over 20 years. I've seen her pick lumber, change plans when she found unexpected grain patterns, and solve problems that would have ruined other craftsmen's work. You might be able to follow her procedures, but you can't replace her judgment. I'm not buying generic furniture, son. I'm buying Dolores Mayfield's expertise, and if she's not making it, I'm not buying it." That same week, 3 other longtime customers called with similar cancellations. The Hendersons, who had ordered a dining room set for their golden anniversary, took back their order and asked me to do it instead. The Johnsons, who had been planning a complete bedroom suite renovation, decided to wait until they could work with me directly. The Pattersons asked me to personally check the kitchen cabinets Marcus had delivered because they were worried about quality problems they noticed during installation. By the end of his 3rd week as owner, Marcus had lost nearly 60% of his expected revenue. He was facing operating costs that were almost $3,000 more per month than his reduced income. Every day he kept the doors open was costing him money he didn't have. Every day we worked was making our position in the market stronger and building relationships that would keep us going for years. That evening, Marcus showed up at my house. He wasn't the confident son who had forced papers across a desk 3 weeks earlier. His face was gray with exhaustion. His clothes were wrinkled from days of sleeping in shop clothes. His hands were shaking a little as he rang the doorbell. The change was remarkable and terrible. He looked like a man who had been carrying weight far beyond what he could handle and was finally starting to break under the load. "Mom," he said when I opened the door. His voice was hoarse from stress. "We need to talk." I didn't invite him in. The evening air was cool and clean. I wasn't ready to let his desperation mess up the peaceful space I had created for myself. "What would you like to talk about? This has to stop. You're destroying everything we worked for." I looked at him for a long moment. I studied the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the way his shoulders slumped with defeat. "Everything who worked for, Marcus? You know what I mean. The business, the reputation, the customer relationships. You're tearing it all down out of spite." "No," I said. My voice was steady as a level line. "I'm not tearing anything down. I'm simply continuing to do what I've always done. Excellent work for people who value good craftsmanship. The fact that you can't compete isn't spite, Marcus. It's consequences." His face got red with frustration and something that might have been shame. "You tricked me. You made me think I was getting the business, but you kept all the important parts." "I didn't trick you," I replied. I felt the satisfaction of 49 years of careful planning finally working out. "You assumed that owning a business meant owning a building and some equipment. You never bothered to understand what actually made that business valuable. You thought you could dismiss my 49 years of experience as cognitive decline and step into my shoes without missing a beat. That's not. We were worried about you. The mistakes, the confusion." "What mistakes, Marcus? Name one actual mistake I made." He opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again without making a sound. We both knew there hadn't been any mistakes. Just a carefully built story designed to justify what they had already decided to do. The silence stretched between us like a deep hole, filled with all the lies he had told and all the assumptions he had made about my weakness and his superiority. "You can't keep these patents forever," he said finally. He was looking for some kind of leverage in a situation where he had none. "Eventually they'll run out and then..." Patent #7/394/128 doesn't run out for another 11 years, I said calmly. I had memorized every important date during the long nights when I planned this moment. Patent #8/231/057 has 14 years left. Patent #9/445/293, which covers the floating panel technique, runs for another 16 years. The licensing agreements with Grandview, Marriott, and Hilton all have renewal clauses that extend automatically as long as I'm actively working. The non-compete clauses in your inherited contracts stay valid for 3 years from the date of transfer, but they can be extended if you try to get around them through subsidiary businesses or partnership arrangements. I watched his face as the math of his situation sank in like a stone through deep water. He had taken over a business with massive overhead and very limited revenue opportunities. Meanwhile, I had kept all the intellectual property and customer relationships that made furniture making profitable. Every month he stayed open would cost him money he didn't have. Every month I worked would make my new company's position in the market stronger and extend my competitive advantages. "You planned this," he whispered. The words were barely louder than the evening breeze. "You knew exactly what you were doing when you signed those papers. Yes, Marcus, I did. Just like I planned every aspect of building this business when you were 3 years old and I was learning to use tools that were bigger than you were. Just like I planned every sacrifice I made to put you through college, every extra shift I worked to pay for your wedding, every long night I spent making sure you had opportunities one never had. His hands were shaking now, not from anger but from the weight of understanding what he had actually done. Not just to me but to himself, to Sarah, to Emma. The business he thought he was stealing was really a trap he had walked into. Every day that passed made his situation worse while mine got stronger. So what happens now? He asked. His voice was small and lost. Now you have choices, I said. I felt the cool satisfaction of a plan done perfectly. You can keep trying to run a business you don't understand with resources you don't have, spending money you can't afford to make furniture you're not qualified to build. Or you can close the shop, cut your losses, and find a career that actually matches your skills and interests. And if I close? If you close, you'll still owe the remaining 18 months of rent on the lease you signed. The insurance premiums that are now your responsibility. And the suppliers who have already delivered materials for orders you can't complete without licensing my techniques. Elena estimates your total liability at about $180,000, plus whatever business loans you might have taken out to cover cash flow shortfalls. The number hit him like a physical blow. He staggered backward, gripping the porch railing to keep from falling. 180,000? That's everything. The house, Sarah's car, Emma's college fund. I nodded. I felt no satisfaction in his pain but no sympathy either. That's what happens when you try to steal something you don't understand. You don't just get the good stuff, Marcus. You get all the responsibilities that come with them. All the debts, all the obligations, all the legal problems that I spent decades learning to manage. Please, he said. For the first time in decades, I heard the little boy I had raised hiding in his voice. He was scared and desperate and completely out of his depth. There has to be something, some way to fix this. I looked at my son, this man I had sacrificed everything to raise. He had repaid that sacrifice by calling me senile and trying to steal my life's work. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to find a solution that would ease his pain and restore some version of our relationship. But a larger part of me remembered sitting at that kitchen table 3 weeks ago, staring at the papers he had forced me to sign, feeling the weight of his betrayal settle into my bones like winter cold. There is one way, I said finally. His head snapped up. Hope flickered in his eyes like the last ember in a dying fire. You can come work for me. The words hung between us like a blade, sharp and clean and absolutely final. Marcus's face went through a series of changes. Confusion, anger, desperate calculation, and finally, complete humiliation. Work for you. Jake needs a helper. The pay is $12 an hour to start. You might get raises based on how well you work and your attitude. You'd be learning basic woodworking skills, following instructions, and doing exactly what you're told without question or complaint. The hours are 7 to 4 Monday through Friday with occasional Saturday work during busy seasons. The offer was both real and cruel and we both knew it. Marcus had a computer science degree from a good university, 15 years of IT management experience and enough pride to choke on. The idea of learning basic shop skills from his mother's helper, of taking orders from people he had recently considered beneath him, of starting over at the very bottom of an industry he had dismissed as manual labor, was probably worse than bankruptcy. You're serious? Completely. You wanted my business, Marcus. This is what my business actually looks like. Showing up every day, learning from people who know more than you do, doing whatever needs to be done without ego or complaint. If you think you can handle that level of humility, Jake starts training new people on Monday mornings at 7 sharp. He stared at me for a long time. His face went through emotions I couldn't name and didn't want to understand. The silence stretched until I could hear the neighbors' TV through their windows, until the street lights began flickering on, until the weight of everything that had changed between us felt heavier than the evening air. Finally, he said, "And if I don't?" "Then you don't. You figure out how to pay your debts, explain to Sarah and Emma why their security disappeared overnight, and live with the consequences of thinking you could outsmart someone who's been surviving in this business since before you were born." Marcus turned without another word and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away. I noticed how his headlights wavered a little, as if his hands were still shaking on the steering wheel. Then I went inside and made myself a cup of tea. I added honey because I could taste the sweetness of complete victory and wanted to enjoy every drop. The next morning, Elena called with news that Marcus had filed for bankruptcy protection and was giving up the shop lease. By afternoon, Jake had heard through the supplier network that Marcus was telling people I had sabotaged him with hidden legal traps, and that I was a mean old woman who had destroyed her own son rather than retire gracefully. 3 weeks later, Sarah called. Her voice was different, smaller somehow. It was stripped of the confidence that had let her sit quietly while her husband stole from his mother. "Dolores, Marcus told me about your job offer. Is it still available?" "The offer stands," I said carefully. "But Sarah, he has to want it. I won't train someone who's there under protest or who thinks he's doing me a favor. This isn't charity or family obligation. It's a chance to learn skills that might actually help him, but only if he's willing to be taught." Marcus showed up at the warehouse the following Monday at 6:47 a.m., 13 minutes before Jake's usual start time. He was wearing work boots I had never seen before. They were still stiff and unmarked by real work. He wore a flannel shirt with the tags still faintly visible along the seam. His hands were soft and pale, unmarked by calluses or scars. "I'm here about the job," he said, not meeting my eyes. Jake looked at me with a question. I looked at Marcus, studying his posture, his expression, the way he held himself like a man getting ready for humiliation. "Are you here because Sarah sent you or because you want to learn?" He was quiet for a long time, staring at the concrete floor while Jake and I waited. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to do anything useful. I spent my whole life thinking I was smarter than people who work with their hands, and now I can't even figure out how to order lumber without losing money. I need to learn, and I need someone to teach me." It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement. It wasn't remorse, but it was honesty. That was enough to start with. 6 months later, Marcus could cut a clean miter joint and had stopped jumping when Jake corrected his technique. His hands were getting calluses in all the right places. His shoulders had gotten broader from lifting heavy boards and wrestling with stubborn machinery. He worked without complaining and asked questions without getting defensive. He approached each task with the focused attention of someone who had learned that being precise mattered more than being fast. We didn't talk about the business transfer or the patents or the money he had lost trying to steal from me. We talked about wood grain and finish types and the satisfaction of creating something that would outlast the person who made it. Slowly, carefully, we began rebuilding something that looked like respect. But it would never again look like the unconditional love I had once offered him. One afternoon, while we were working on a custom bookshelf for the new Marriott downtown, Marcus said, "I never understood what you actually did here." I looked up from the mortise I was cutting. I noted how his technique had improved since morning. "What do you mean?" "I thought it was just making furniture. I didn't realize it was problem solving and engineering and relationship management and 20 other skills I didn't even know existed. I thought anyone could learn it in a few weeks." I nodded and went back to my work. I felt the familiar satisfaction of a joint cut perfectly square. Most people think there's no difference between a job and a craft. That evening, I sat on my small porch with a cup of coffee and watched the sun set over the warehouse district. My phone buzzed with a text message from Emma. Grandma, Dad says you're teaching him to be a real carpenter. Can you teach me too this summer? I smiled and typed back. If you're willing to start at the beginning and learn to do things right. Marcus had called me senile, gullible, and trusting. He had forced me to sign papers because he thought I didn't need my life's work anymore. But he had been wrong about everything. I wasn't finished building. I was just getting started on the most important project of my career. Teaching my son that some things can't be stolen, only earned. And every day he showed up to learn, he paid a little more for every line of ink on those papers he had made me sign.